So to give you guys a little bit of background information on who I am, my name is Emily Gover, and I'm one of the librarians over here at EasyBib.com. And before I joined the EasyBib team, I worked as an academic librarian down at a small college in Georgia. And while I was there, I did a lot of public services, so lots of reference work, some classroom instruction, and plenty of one-on-one reference interviews with students there. And while I was working there, I really saw a lot of the struggles that students face with the research process and how many of them are lacking the basic information literacy skills that they need to appropriately conduct research, both in college, but a lot of them were freshman students, so you could see that they didn't have these skills even during high school, let alone when they get to the college level. If you aren't familiar with EasyBib, to give you a little bit of background on the company, we are an intuitive information literacy platform, so we're most well known for our bibliography tool, but we also provide other features as well, such as web evaluation and research and note-taking tools as well. Off with some raw numbers here, as opposing to going straight into the percentages and the statistics. 7 million. This is the number of students who have used EasyBib over the past 12 months. And because of this huge number of users that we have, we really have a unique insight into the way that secondary and college students are creating their citations and completing their research. So combined with our own research that we've pulled from analyzing data from EasyBib, we're there some recent findings on the status of research methods and citation practices. What we did here was we took the most cited source formats on EasyBib and we ranked them based on how frequently they're cited. The data here was pulled from about 6 to 8 weeks of usage from earlier this year, so it's relatively frequent. And librarians, we all know the basic problems here. Students are not using library resources in their research and relying on search engines to do their scholarly research. You could take a moment just to think to yourselves about which source formats do you think correlate with these percentages on the screen. The chart better visualizes these percentages for you. 10% of our citations from this data set come from websites. Books come distant second place at 15% each, journals at 6%, and newspapers and, interestingly enough, photographs are tied in 4th and 5th place, respectively, at 2% each. And all of the other 54 types that we offer on EasyBib are squished into the remaining 25%. So EasyBib offers 59 different types of sources for students to cite, but it's clear from here that websites are their preferred method of research. And this is from a very small data set, so we're pretty sure that over the grand scheme of things, altogether, websites are cited more than half of the time. It could be because they're intimidated, or maybe they're confused, or just plain lazy, but it's clear that students are relying on websites to complete their research and, in turn, maybe underutilizing library resources. An interesting trend we're noticing is an increase in the use of multimedia citations. On the previous slide, we saw that photographs are in the top 5 most cited sources on EasyBib, and included in the top 10 are also digital images and films. Now, the top 25 sources, we have musical recordings and also TV programs. So providing an easy way to locate and cite a variety of different source types, students are able to diversify their sources and know how to properly credit them as well. From the pie chart that you saw before, that students are going to the web to do their research, but where specifically are they going? We have the top 10 most cited websites from the same data set as the previous slides. Certainly, many of the websites here that students are going to for their research projects have a fair amount of credibility. So we have websites like the New York Times, BBC News, Washington Post, but interspersed with these, we also have several user-generated content websites, like Answers.com, Associated Content, which is now known as Yahoo Voices, but is still equally user-generated, and also YouTube. We left out what our most cited website is from this data set, and perhaps you could take a guess as to what it could possibly be. Right, it is Wikipedia. Students are going to the old standard that they feel so comfortable with using. Keep in mind, this data is a reflection of both our paid and free users, both secondary and higher educational institutions. Later on, we'll touch upon our features that librarians are using to teach information literacy to their students to help alleviate these trends and issues. Who aren't familiar with it, Project Information Literacy is an ongoing study from the University of Washington's iSchool and is being led by two librarians over there, Allison Head and Mike Eisenberg. Over the past 3 or 4 years, they've been into the field to see how college students are approaching and conducting their research. And one of their studies found that the vast majority of students are using Google in course-related contexts, over 95% of them. And course-related context can mean anything from a homework assignment to a final paper or a project or presentation. And 85% of them are using Wikipedia. This isn't exactly breaking news to many of us, but it's troubling either way. And OCLC conducted a study where they talked with college students about their use of electronic information resources. And they found a massive, massive increase in the use of Ask an Expert websites over a 5-year period from 2005 to 2010. The Ask an Expert here is used pretty loosely. It includes resources like Answers.com, which you saw before was one of the more frequently cited websites from that data set that we pulled. To give you an idea of the types and quality of questions that people are asking, and in turn, the quality of answers that you may find, one of the questions I saw on Answers.com is, do cats know their cats? So just to give you an idea of what type of questions people are asking on this website and what of information you can find there, I think that in itself speaks volumes. So we found this percentage, the 6% increase, to be particularly interesting. So we cross-referenced it with our own users, and we saw the same trend on EasyBib. As I mentioned before, if you recall from your slide, Answers.com was ranked near the lower end of the top 10 of websites credited on EasyBib. And it seems to consistently linger around that point. Unfortunately, this is a side note, but the OCLC study also found that only 10% of those polled are using online library question services, just Question Point or Meebo before Google decided to shut it down last month, or help. And this was really upsetting to me because when I was in college and library school, I used this service pretty frequently, and it's a really simple way for students to access librarians and their knowledge and expertise without having to do a whole lot of effort on their end of things. So hopefully find ways to bring virtual reference to our students a little bit better. The OCLC study also found that 40% of college students aren't even using their library's website, let alone its resources. Of haven't used it, so of that 40% who have never even gone to their library's website, almost a quarter of them believe that other websites out there have better information. So it's clear that students are unaware of the value of the library's website and what type of information that they can find there. And this was really alarming to me, and surely students need to be better informed of the resources and authoritative content that they can find through the library's website. That students just don't understand what it is that they're citing. So the difference between a search engine and a database isn't necessarily clear to them. You can see here some of the more frequently cited websites that we see, and this isn't to say this is in the top 20 websites that are cited, but it could be within the top 200 to 250. Google Images, Google, and EasyBib are all some of the more frequently cited websites that really shouldn't be there. My guess with Google Images is that students are going to cite digital images more. As we saw before, we've seen an increase in those types of resources. And perhaps they don't understand that when they're citing a digital image, they should go to the source URL of where the image is. And instead, they go to Google Images to find whatever it is that they're looking for. And when they find it, they just copy and paste, cite Google Images as the place where they found it. As for the reason why they're citing EasyBib, I'm not too sure with that. It would be awesome if they were running research papers about EasyBib and they wanted to cite us, but I find that highly unlikely, at least for the number of times that it is being cited. Guess here is that perhaps a teacher or a professor saying you need to cite everything that you use to put this paper together in your works cited page. And perhaps students are thinking, well, I used EasyBib to build my bibliography, so maybe I need to cite it. This here comes from an external study that breaks down how students are citing their information. This is a part of the Citation project, which is separate from Project Information Literacy, but Allison Head did do an interview with the people who are running it, which is where this information was pulled from. As you can see, direct quotes are definitely the popular choice of how students are citing information. And then we also have paraphrasing and patch writing third place. And if you aren't familiar with patch writing, it's just a really poorly, carelessly put together paraphrase. And only 6% of students are using a summary, which is really when they would go in and synthesize the information. So it seems that they're just kind of scanning through and just picking out and choosing what type of quotes or paraphrases that they want to use. And they're not really going through and analyzing and synthesizing the information from these sources. A study from the College and Research Libraries Journal analyzed the number of citations that were found in various papers. The majority of these papers only had 1 to 5 sources cited. 6 to 10 sources were cited in a distant second place, and then 10 or more citations per paper followed soon after. There was positive correlation between the number of citations and word count, which is definitely a positive sign, and EasyBib also have a feature that encourages this practice as well. But regardless of that, the fact that more than 70% of these citations in college papers, this was done at a small college in the Midwest, and they analyzed freshman papers, and they found that there's only 1 to 5 sources on these papers. We also went ahead and cross-referenced this statistic with our own data, and the average EasyBib bibliography is 3 to 4 citations long. So with a relatively low number of citations, one might think that maybe lengthier sources are being used. So maybe if they are only using 3 to 4 really great sources, and that's all that they need to put these papers together. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Project also found that more than a quarter of the sources analyzed in their study were only 2 pages or fewer, and slightly less than half were 4 pages or fewer. So they're not going to terribly long sources, and we can determine if they're using and reading all of the information in these short resources as well. Where in the source students are going, I found these statistics really alarming. 70% of information cited in these papers came from the first 2 pages of the source. Just under half of them came from the very first page. It's likely from these statistics that students are delving deep and analyzing their information. But if you recall our earlier slides, half of all of the sources cited do come from websites, which may account for this high percentage, mainly because when students go to websites, the content that they use on these, from these resources don't really run very long. Sometimes you'll find articles on the New York Times or other newspapers or magazines that can run 7 or so pages in length, but typically information that are on websites is usually pretty short. when they explain these high percentages. And a reminder, you can see the top sources that I cited on EasyBib again. So websites are significantly cited most frequently, and books come in a distant second place at 15%. Not over what types of sources students use and how they're citing them, but when exactly are they doing it? This data that we pulled from EasyBib's Google Analytics account. And this may not be terribly surprising, but students are primarily creating their citations at night. They, or not necessarily may, where they don't have access to a teacher or librarian, unless they are at a college library that's open particularly late, where they still have librarians behind the reference desk and available for a different interview and for guidance with their research. But most likely, students are putting these citations together when they don't have access to librarians. So the most popular time, on average, is at 9 p.m., and then 10 p.m. and 8 p.m. come in second and third place, respectively. So usually in the late evening towards nighttime when they're putting their citations together. More usage data that you might find interesting. This shows when they're citing by the hour on which day. So the most popular days and times on average that students are citing on EasyBib is Monday at 10 p.m., Monday at 9 p.m., and then Sunday at 9 p.m. I think it would be really interesting for us to go maybe a couple months down the road and pull some more data to see if this changes based on the time of year, to see how students are citing maybe during finals week or at the beginning of the school year when things are a little bit slower, and see if there are changes in when they're going and doing their, putting together their bibliographies. In addition to the data that we've analyzed from our usage statistics, we also conducted a student survey, and we collected 2,700 responses from EasyBib users on their research habits. More than 60% of them said that they don't always use an outline when writing research papers, and just over half of them add a citation when they're writing a paraphrase, which is just absolutely insane. You saw before on one of the other pie charts from the Citation project that paraphrases are the second most used form of other sources, their papers, but half of them are adding a citation. The demographic that we used for this study came from our free users who were accessing EasyBib over the course of 4 or 5 days, but it did come from our free users. So this can span anywhere from middle schoolers through high school, community college, and four-year colleges as well. But we had an overwhelming response, and these statistics were slightly surprising for me, at least. Half of the students that we surveyed as well are less likely to cite sources without bibliographic management tools. They say, it's too difficult, or it's too hard, or it's too time-consuming for them to do it without one. So most students, more than half of them, have adjusted to creating their bibliographies using these online management tools. We know that not citing things properly or all can really lead to bigger problems for students. A 2011 Pew Research study showed that 50% of college presidents saw an increase in plagiarism over the past 10 years. 55%, the vast majority of them, 89%, believe that computers and the internet have played a major role in this trend of increase in plagiarism and hardly any decrease at all. Conducted a study a couple of years ago between 2010 and 2011. We analyzed 33 million papers and analyzed the type, how frequently students were plagiarizing and where they were plagiarizing their sources. It's already apparent how prevalent this issue is. These numbers really bring it home. There were 128 million content matches found in these 33 million papers, which averages out to about 3.8 instances of plagiarism for each paper. And in regards to plagiarizing user-generated content websites, there are 23.6 million content matches in higher education and 11.5 million for secondary schools. Pretty big discrepancy between these two numbers, and this can be explained simply because Turnitin caters so to higher educational institutions, so they have more subscribers in colleges and universities than they do for high schools. Also found out where their users are plagiarizing their information from. And as you can see here, it's mostly more or less from user-generated content websites. So for both higher ed and secondary schools, Wikipedia and Yahoo Answers were ranked first and second, respectively, for both of these institutions. Wikipedia was plagiarized over 10% of the time, Turnitin papers for higher ed, and about 8% for secondary schools. Yahoo Answers was also around 8% for high schools. Only, I mean, it was still 4%, which is still a very high percentage for plagiarizing Yahoo Answers, which is, I think, probably worse than Answers.com, if that is even possible. To reiterate, we here at EasyBib, we're constantly reaching out to librarians and finding out what struggles their students are facing and how we can better develop features and tools that can improve their information literacy skills. So we also analyze the data that we get from our users, and we've built a product called Library Edition that helps students learn these information literacy skills to help them become expert researchers. So with that said, that's all I had to show you guys today as part of the informational part of the presentation. I'm going to pass this off in just a couple minutes to my coworker, Wendy. And if you guys would like to see what type of information literacy features we have available to students, you're more than welcome to stay, but please do not feel obligated to. If you don't want to see this demo, you are more than welcome to leave now. We do have this will be archived, so I can send an archived recording of this webinar as well, if that would be of interest to you. So just hang tight real quick. I'm going to close this off, and I will pass it off to Wendy in just a moment. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to ask them in the chat box, and I'll address them as Wendy continues on with the live demo.
Hey, thanks, Emily. And everyone, this is Wendy speaking. Thanks for joining us again. As a fellow librarian, I'm very excited to show you EasyBib's premium features, which help address many of the issues Emily touched upon. So let me just... So the first one we're going to look at is called AutoCite. And with this feature, users can enter a URL, keyword, auth, or title, and EasyBib finds related sites or sources. Many searches are powered by WorldCat, and Crossref.org powers our journal search. What we do is we scrape the metadata from a web page, and we enter it into the proper boxes on the form. So by doing this, we remind the students that they should confirm all the data and modify it if necessary, as you can see here. next we have our Learn site, and it shows the students how citations will be formatted as they enter in information about the resource. It's a great visualization tool that helps users understand the construction of a citation by making the process less intimidating as well. We also analyzed 5,000 of our most commonly cited websites and determined if they are credible, maybe credible, or not credible. We used 11 criteria similar to the CRAP test to do this. Some of you might be familiar with it. And this will appear at the top of websites that are cited. So click on the Learn More seen here. See the criteria sets used when we evaluated the website. They can access this criteria every time they cite a website, regardless of whether or not we've already checked it. So remember that stat that 40% of students don't use the library's website? You can bring those resources to a platform that students are already using. We are with OCLC, so we use a library's WorldCat local account or embed a OPAC widget right on our homepage seen here. We have the ability to embed virtual reference chat boxes, add links to the library's website, and contact information. It makes your resources a lot more discoverable during the process, and students towards your catalog and your books and databases while they are searching. We provide citation and source guides that detail where bibliographic data is found on different sources. These guides also help students navigate through the massive amounts of information out there and teach them to properly give credit. Many students find that the real challenge when completing a research project is to organize, process, and think critically about the sources they're using and how to relate them to their assignment. The EasyBib digital notebook can help. Our notebook has lots of features which we will show you in a minute. I'll give you a quick overview. Our book is a dynamic workspace where users can organize notes and critically think about their research. Then be grouped to develop key concepts and placed into a student's outline seen here. Excuse me. It's an incredibly powerful tool that makes organizing and developing of ideas interactive and structured. Our bibliography analytics feature lets users visualize the diversity of their sources and credibility of the website in their bibliography. It prompts students to reflect on the quality of their research, can encourage them to explore other areas of research as well. So, thanks for joining us. Now we're going to do a live demonstration so that you can actually see these tools and features in action. So just give me one moment. Okay. Oops. One moment. So I've logged into my existing Library Edition accounts, and so when students or teachers log in, this is the first page they'll see. Immediately, you'll notice the library branding to the right that I mentioned before, and once again, we make it so that your resources are discoverable as they're doing their bibliography, so that if they need to get an extra resource, they can go right there instead of taking that extra step to find your library and search for your resources. On the left, we also have a My Projects list listed and has a link to their bibliography, notebook, and a pure link to Google Docs. So if a student has a Google account, this can link right to the paper that they're actually working on. That way, all parts of a paper are kept in the same place. Okay, thank you for waiting. I also want to point out the shared feature. So students can actually share a project with fellow students or instructor. Shared projects will be available on the bottom of one's page, or actually projects other people have shared with me. And once that happens, it's really good for collaboration or for a teacher to actually go in, view his work, and leave comments. That would monitor students' progress and help guide them through a more full research paper. Okay, in your project, you just click Create New Project, the title. With Library Edition, you have the option of APA and Chicago to Arabian, but we're going to go with the default MLA. Okay, now we're ready to add a citation, so I'm going to click Bibliography, and the 5 most commonly cited source types are at the top. We have 59 options total. Everything students are used to, from digital files to digital images, newspapers, and so forth, but things that they're not yet familiar with but should become familiar with, such as dissertations, federal bills, and so forth. We have a premium feature with Library Edition called Upload Citations. So if you have subscriptions with databases like EBSCO, Gale, and so forth, they can actually export citations from there and import them into here so that they can keep everything in one place. I'll mention, if you notice, there's a double orange arrow next to some of these. That indicates the auto-cite function, which I mentioned earlier, which means that we pull data from our various sources to auto-populate a form. So I'm going to take the liberty of opening a Wikipedia page. Since that's what they're usually citing. So a page, all you do is copy the URL, paste to our search, cite this. Audit will fill it as much as possible. Immediately at the top, we draw a student's attention to website credibility, and then by showing them the criteria here, students begin to learn the process and start building those 21st century skills they need in college and beyond. If you click Show Form, your site appear to the right. And once again, it shows students where the different data elements come from, telling they know where to find these elements, where to look, and how to use it. The structure, what goes there, and shows them the rules if necessary, making the whole process less intimidating. We'll have an add annotation option here. That's our environment. Everything looks good. Create citation, and it will be automatically formatted and alphabetized into their bibliographies. I'm going to switch projects really quick. Because I will show you the Analyze feature, and it's better with a more robust bibliography. Analyze is featured at the top here. It's students, it goes into their teachers' minds, kind of showing them what a quality bibliography should look like, It touches upon different things like diversity of source types and so forth, giving each an explanation and a score, and telling students how to improve their score if they need to. There are some other non-scored that might still be pertinent, such as years published if it's a current events report, dates cited so you can see if they did it in a day, did they do it a week, and again, annotations. So again, just giving students a way to take initiative in building a strong bibliography and giving them a sense of what it should look like. Once a bibliography is finished, they have a number of exportation options. Again, they can share it with fellow classmates. They can save it as a Google Doc, print it as a Word doc, paste it in another document, or even share it as a public URL. We also have in citation widgets, for MLA and APA, it's parentheticals. For Chicago Turabian, it's footnotes. What they do is click on the link below the citation they want, put the correct data, and copy and paste it into their text. And if they don't know what to do with this, we even link them to the rules here. Once again, just making the whole process very easy and showing them that it's not so hard to cite a source while making their own opinions known. And if they find out that their paper's in MLA, be an APA, all they have to do is click the format links at the top and it's changed. So that's all I'm going to show you for bibliography, but we're going to move on to our fabulous notebook. I'm getting really good feedback from educators who say that it helps get students into the habit of organizing and investing time into their notes. Students like it because it's very easy to use and colorful. So I made all of these cards, but everything here is user created. All you have to do is clean note, give a card a title, and you can associate it with the source, but only if the source has already been inputted, emphasizing the best practice habit of recording sources while they are studying rather than scrambling at the end for them. This also gives students a way to digitize a part they're already used to by simply copying and pasting quotes from sources and putting it here. That gives them a place to write down their thoughts and think critically about how they're going to present this information in their actual papers. We also have many nice features, text identifiers, and colors, which are really good for today's visually oriented students. Space is very user intuitive. Cards can be clicked and dragged around, add to group, extended on, and so forth. And if there's not enough space, we also have a bird's eye view to give as much room as they need to process their thoughts. So the visualized view, we also have a list view, which is more linear and detail-oriented. And view it either by groups, text, sources, and dates. And this is very good for detail-oriented students and to quickly identify certain issues. For example, if I go by groups, I can see if a certain point needs more notes or half notes, or look at sources. I can see if I've overused a source or if I need to add sources to some cards. But the best part about all of this is the dynamic outline to the side. And once it's very user intuitive, you can use the buttons at the top. You can double click in his face, drag it up, drag it to the right, and you drop and drag your note cards into it. Many times, students can use the print option, content and organization of their outline. The best way for them to read out their papers or even to give the outline to their teachers as a status report. show you the educator's blog really quick. And this is where Emily actually posts a lot of her blog entries, but also posts and updates with our features. For student guides that we showed you earlier, you can click Students. Everything will appear to the side, and we touch upon the whole process. So we have one for research, writing, citation topics, and these are all visual and detailed as possible so students get a full view. Then click on how to tell if you're plagiarizing, because that's my favorite. These are all printable and downloadable for use, and they're free. That's all I have to show you today. But if you have any questions for me and Emily, we're going to stick around for a while, and so feel free to post them in the chat box.
Hi, Emily here again. Thank you to those of you who have decided to stick around and see the live demo. We really appreciate it. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. Either one is fine, and we would be happy to address them now. You can also contact us via email or on Twitter, so I'm going to put that information in the chat box now in case you need to get in touch with me afterwards. So we'll just hang out here for a couple minutes more, and if you have any questions, enter them in the chat box. Thanks.